Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be discussing a new topic, and I want to kind of make this a little mini series where I want to be talking about just basic Dota concepts for maybe newer players or players that want to start getting into playing the game more competitively. So what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about every five role. There's five positions in Dota, 1 through 5, and I want to talk about each one, kind of what they do, their main jobs, and then I'm going to make some more individual videos about each one specifically. But for this one, I just want to give a kind of a broad overview idea of how each role plays in Dota 2 and what they do. Now, before we start going over each role, I want to quickly mention what the 1 through 5 means. And what that means is 1 gets the most priority on gold and creeps, and 5 gets the least amount of gold on priority on gold and creeps. So the 1 is the carry, and they're hitting creeps the most. And so the way I like to think about this is, let's say 2 heroes walk up to a creep wave, a completely safe creep wave. The 1 will get the highest priority, and the 5 will get the least. So if there's a position 3 and a position 4 walk up to the creep wave, the position 3 gets the creeps. If position 1 and a position 2 walk up to the creep wave, typically the position 1 gets the creeps, but this can be sometimes interchangeable between the 1 and the 2. But typically the 1 gets the creeps. Now, 4 and 5 should almost always, unless you're specifically close to a big item, you should always be giving your waves to any core role, which is 1, 2, and 3. So 4 and 5 should be staying away from the creeps for the most part. There's a time and a place to be doing these things, but that's a little bit more in depth, and I don't want to go over that right now. But usually, like I said, the 1 hits the creeps the most. 1, 2, and 3 are cores, and they want to hit the creeps in lane, and they just kind of farm throughout the game. And 4 and 5 do not hit creeps. Instead, they use their time harassing enemy heroes and setting up plays and warding and smoking and all that stuff. So just to get the gold out of the way, um, because that's kind of just the main like idea to get in your head about which roles do what. So if you are a player that likes to farm a lot, maybe you'll play 1 or 2, and if you're a player that likes to focus a lot more on the strategy of the game, maybe you're going to play some sort of support. Now, starting with the 5 role, so position 5, also known as hard support, the job of this role is to protect your carry and to make sure your team has vision and to sometimes they have big team fight abilities, and usually a lot of the times their role is to save and protect the carry. So there's a lot of heroes that do that, and a lot of the heroes that play this role have save abilities, or they buy items like Glimmer Cape and Force Staff to make sure this happens. You want to be buying wards throughout the entire match, Observer wards and Sentry wards, to make sure your team has vision so they can see the enemies coming and to avoid ganks and bad situations. In lane, the 5 wants to pull the camp and make sure the carry has a good equilibrium of the creeps so that the carry is safe and able to get a good start in the game. It's very important as a 5 to be able to lane so that you can keep your carry afloat in the mid games after they get a good start. And your job is to tank ganks, make sure your carry's happy, try to win lane. Um, and this role is typically the most macro intensive because it's the least mechanically demanding role. So you will be making a lot of plays and calls. In Pro Dota, the captain is usually the position 5 because of this. They can make a lot of calls, and they're usually the one on the team that kind of comes up with the strategy and the game plan to win. So if you're someone who likes to take control of the team and like kind of like tell them where to play and like when to go on people and make smokes and make things happen, this is typically comes from the position 5. You're kind of like the captain of and the anchor of the team in a lot of ways. Now, some examples of position 5s in the hard supports, if you want to call them, are Lich, Oracle, Warlock. These heroes like to protect the carry. They like to buy defensive items, Force Staff, Glimmer Cape. They like to ward, and they don't require items to come online since 5 gets the least amount of gold. So they can operate pretty much for the most part without items. Now, getting into the 4 position, it becomes a little more tricky. So the 4 position, or otherwise known as soft support, is the role in which the player also plays support, so they're not getting priority on gold as like a core would, but they want to be doing a little bit of a different job than the 5, and a lot of people get 4 and 5 confused, and the line is very blurry. between the two, but the 4 starts in the off lane. So the 3 and the 4 start in a lane, and the 1 and the 5 start in a lane. And the mid goes solo. So how the 4 plays is they typically want to be a little bit greedier than the 5, and they're warding a less. They obviously want to buy observer wards to set up in areas, to put wards down in areas so they can make stuff happen, but they're usually not spamming sentries like 5 positions do. And 4 positions are typically initiator heroes or heroes that have some sort of stuns or catch, or heroes that can follow up really well with other initiators. So the way the 4 plays is they harass the position 1 along with, so the 4 and the 3, the offlaner and the soft support, harass the enemy 1, which is the hard carry, and the 5, they lane against each other. I don't know if I'm explaining this well, but they lane against each other. And the 4 wants to trade with the 5, and the 4 typically likes to be a little more of an aggressive hero than the 5 is, and the 4 usually doesn't have any save abilities, and they're playing more to be aggressive than to be passive and saving, if you know what I mean. So the 5 will typically want to save their carry and play to make sure their carry is happy, whereas the 4 plays to make the enemy carry miserable, and the 4 plays to enable their offlaner and to work with their mid to go and roam around the map a little bit more and to pick up power runes and do more map objectives in the early game. So as the 4 position, they lane with the 3, and then eventually whenever 6-minute water runes come up, or they go for the experience rune, or and whenever Dota changes, things change, but typically as a 4 position you want to be playing for early objectives and kind of roaming a little bit more than the 5 would. The 5 wants to babysit the carry, and the 4 wants to harass the enemies and make things happen, whether that means leaving lane to go pressure the mid laner, or staying in lane with the offlaner to dumpster the carry. Now, some examples of 4 positions are, there's a couple different styles of 4 you can play. So you can play 4 that kind of stays in lane and helps a little bit more, or you can play a 4 that's kind of a roamer, which this is becoming less of a thing, but in the past there was definitely a more prominent emphasis on roaming. So heroes like Spirit Breaker, Earth Spirit, Nyx Assassin, these are heroes that want to roam a little bit more often, and once they hit their early game, like early-ish power spike, they tend to just kind of leave lane and roam forever and just constantly hunt down and look for kills. So like Earth Spirit, once he has a couple points in roll, he can just roll and start fights and kind of roam around and catch people off guard and gank a lot off very often. Spirit Breaker can charge globally. Nyx Assassin can go invisible once he hits level 6 and pick off people. And then there's another style of 4 which is kind of a more team fight and spellcast oriented, which is like these are typically backliners like Rubik, Grimstroke, Dark Willow. These heroes win team fights, but they don't want to go first. They want to kind of play for follow-up damage and follow-up disable with their offlaner or mid laner. So there's a couple different ways you can play 4 position, and it's kind of just comes up to personal preference the more you play. Next, we have the position 3, or the offlaner. And now this is my favorite role, and this is the role that I've played in Dota, and this is, in my opinion, the most fun one. But the job of this role is, it's kind of changed a little bit over the years. Not too much, but so typically the hard carry and the offlaner lane against each other. And the hard carry wants, their objective is to get out of lane with as much farm as they can, and then continue to farm and scale. And then later on, eventually they hit their 4 or 5 item timing and they just carry the game. And now the offlaner is similar to this, but they want to, instead of playing the lane to get a lot of farm and leave and farm even more, they want to kind of play the lane to get an early power spike and then dominate the entire rest of the game with their early lead. So some examples of this are, like, let's say some of the popular offlaners like Mars. He will get a level 6 and then he will go and look to kill you with Arena. And a lot of safe laners, when they hit their level 6 or 7 timings, they are not as strong as offlaners, which is what makes offlaners so much more powerful in the early game. Heroes like Doom, Mars, when these heroes get level 6, you almost can't lane against them. Brewmaster, you just can't lane against them in lane anymore, so it kicks a lot of carries out. And that's the job of the offlaner. You want to do well in your lane, and it's typically been referred to as the hard lane in the past, but that was back in the days of tri-lane, and now in Dota it's just 2v2 in the side lanes, and it becomes a lot easier nowadays because everyone knows what they're doing and they know lane manipulation techniques. So if you're playing a weaker laner, you can have your 4 drag waves and cut creeps and all that stuff. And there's a lot of ways to get out of the offlane without getting dominated. And the offlane can be tricky, But once you get the hang of it and know what you're doing, you'll simply just be able to dominate once you get an early lead in lane. A lot of my favorite heroes get early leads and then they just become the strongest hero on the map by minute 5 or 6, and they could just kill their lane partner over and over. And you don't really want to leave your off lane as much, so if you have a 4 position that can go make plays around the map, it's really good to pick a strong off laner so that once your 4 position feels gives you a good enough lane, they can roam and do things while you're still in lane 1v2ing because you're so much more powerful than the enemy's heroes. And there's a couple different ways you can play off lane. Um, there's so you can play as a kind of a carry-ish from the off lane. So heroes like Legion Commander, um, and like Razor, and some of these like more scaling offlaners tend to do that. And then you can also play like a team fighter and an aura buyer. So heroes like Darkseer, Tidehunter like to buy auras. They like to have these big team fight ultimates, and they like to kind of just win the team fights by initiating with like Ravage or Wall of Replica. And then there's another way you can play, which is kind of more of a zoo push-oriented way. And this is playing like super fast tempo and getting early summons and just being really strong early on. So heroes like Beastmaster, Visage, Lycan, these heroes like to get really strong, have an army of units to summon, and then just run down your towers. And if you try to fight them, they have such a mass amount of units that it's impossible to fight, and just capitalizes on just winning your lane and having a fast tempo. And there's just a couple ways you can play offlane, like I mentioned, and it's very fun. In my opinion, I'm being a little biased here, but this is the role that I love. But the main job of the offlaner is to get strong early and pressure the hell out of the enemy carry and just kind of dumpster them once you get to your main power spike, whatever it be. Um, so yeah, that's offlane. Next up is the mid lane. This is position 2. Now, mid laners are a lot more competitive, I'd say, than other players, because this is because of the fact that they're in the 1v1 lane. So the mid lane is a 1v1 lane, and both players typically are battling it out for last hits and denies in a solo lane. So this makes them a lot more competitive because they are the only reason they lose their lane, let's say. So compared to side lanes where it's a 2v2, if maybe your lane partner is not very good, then it's kind of like, oh, whatever, I can't really win this lane. But in mid, this is the most mechanically difficult skill because it's all about outlasting your opponents and outplaying them. And you can dive towers with glyphs, and you can pull creep waves back and deny every creep. There's a lot of things you can do in the mid lane, and it's a very difficult role. It might be one of the hardest roles. I would argue it's either mid or position 4, the two hardest roles in the game. Now, mid laners will be 1v1ing until they get to about level 6 or 7, or at minute 6 the power rune spawns in the river, so the mid laners will be fighting over the rune, and usually whoever gets the rune first will typically rotate. And now the mid laner's job is to go mid 1v1, get the solo XP, get the gold, and then when they have their higher XP advantage, they will rotate and they will go help and win side lanes. A lot of heroes that go in the mid lane are level dependent, which is why they're better in the mid lane than other lanes. So if you have a mid hero in another lane, maybe they are the same level as the enemy, but they can't do as much because mid laners typically rely on having an XP advantage to work well. So these mid laners, once they get their XP advantage and they get their power rune, they will leave lane and they will go gank and make a lot of kills happen. So a lot of players like to play mid in solo queue games because it's the easiest role to have the highest impact on. Whereas in other lanes, if you're losing your lane or whatever, it's a lot harder to just like make everything happen. But in mid lane, if you dominate your lane, you can go and gank and kill all 4 other heroes if you're good enough, and you can kind of just win the game by rotating at perfect times with your lead and advantage, and just kill the enemies over and over because you're so much stronger than them. Now, just like with 3 and 4, there's a couple different ways you can play the mid lane. And so there are certain heroes that are just lane dominators, and this means that they make your lane so unplayable that you just have a really rough start, and the game becomes very hard for you to come back in. And so these heroes are Viper, Huskar, and Timber, just to name a few. And these heroes like to, if they get the right matchup, they like to make it so that you literally can't walk into the lane at all, or you'll just die, or you'll lose 90% of your HP. And other types of mid laners, which is the more standard generic mid, are heroes that get XP fast and then they rotate to other lanes and kill, like Puck, Storm Spirit, Leshrac, Tinker. These heroes are very mechanically hard, but once you master them, you can make a lot happen. And you can this role typically is highlighted in clips and like good gameplay because it's easy to see when you outplay someone compared to some of the other roles. And this role and hard carry probably get the most shine when it comes to just credit for winning the game, I guess. But yeah, that's mid. Now we move on to the final role, which is position one, or hard carry. And the reason it's called hard carry is because this role and this set of heroes, um, it carries the game, like in the name. So once you get towards your item timings, and each hero is a little bit different, but these heroes usually when they get 4, 5, or 6 items, they are just the strongest hero in the whole game, and that's why they're called hard carry because they're weak early and they're really strong later, so they truly carry the game. Um, and so the role of this is, you're laning against the offlaner. You want to survive your lane. You want to win your lane and get as much gold as you can. And then you want to kind of jungle and push lanes. And the way of playing the map is, I'll go into more detail in another video, but the way you play is you get your items and then you fight and you win. And so you're not skirmishing as much early on. You kind of prioritize farming jungle or lane creeps over fighting typically because that gets you more gold. And a lot of these heroes that play carry have flash farming capabilities, so they'll clear creeps really fast, and they'll just keep farming and so much faster. And then, if forgotten about, they'll come out of jungle or their lane with a 10k gold advantage over you, and you're like, "What the hell happened? I was playing the game, and then but you ignored the carry." So that's usually why 3 and 4, like and mid laners pressure the enemy carry to prevent this from happening. And if you're a good carry player, you'll be able to carry the game if given enough space. And that's kind of what the goal of Dota is to make space for your win condition, who is typically your hard carry. Win conditions can be played in other roles, mid and offlane, but usually your hard carry is your win condition. And so if you protect and you enable your one to have the best possible game, and they come out and they carry the game, that's what it's really all about with this role. You want to use the space to your advantage and farm up all your items, and then come in, win a bunch of team fights for your team because you're so much stronger than the enemy, and that's how it's done. Now, some hero examples for position one are there's some heroes have innate farming abilities which allow them to just farm right off the bat, and some heroes like to get an early farming item first, like Battle Fury or Maelstrom or whatever it may be, to help accelerate their farm. Some examples of heroes that buy farming items are Faceless Void, likes to buy Maelstrom, um, Juggernaut, Maelstrom, Battle Fury, Ursa, Battle Fury, stuff like this. They buy these items to help make them hit creeps faster and truly snowball their gold and carry the game, come online a little bit faster. And then there are heroes with innate farming abilities like Luna, Sven, Medusa. These heroes just have abilities that help them farm quick, so they can farm really fast if left alone. And if they have a bad game, they can go and hit jungle. Whereas if heroes like PA have a bad game, they need to go farm their Battle Fury and catch up, which will take a lot longer than if Luna has a bad game and is able to go use Moonglaves in the jungle. Now that's kind of a small overview of what all 5 of those roles do, and I plan to make a more in-depth video about each role. But for now, that's just kind of a quick summary of what all the roles do. And over time of playing Dota 2, you'll find what you like, and certain people are catered to certain roles. And I honestly just love all 5 roles, and they're really fun. But I have my own preference of what I like to play. Um, but yeah, if you want to just find a role, I'd suggest picking every single hero, playing them at least once, finding one role that you really like over games. So be it the off lane, safe lane, hard support, whatever you like, and then just kind of focusing on that and mastering it at best as you can. All right, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, everybody. Um, and I will just leave a little reminder that I stream every day on Twitch uh, with the name Daniel Pandaman, no spaces. I stream every day trying to get better at Dota 2. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and more videos to come in the future. Have a good day, everybody. Peace out.